My love is violet blossoms, tender to the touch. You will surrender to me. Within the realm of hearts embracing, don't you realize you're facing ecstasy?
And that was My Love Is, featuring our guest Dick Weisberg, who played drums for the Beacon Street Union, one of the three bands known in 67-68 as the Bosstown Sound. They actually played at my high school when I was in 9th grade, so I'm dating myself here. They released 2 acclaimed LPs, The Eyes of the Beacon Street Union and The Clown Died in Marvin Gardens. Thanks for being here today, Dick. So is it the Beacon Street Union or just Beacon Street Union?
It was funny, I was thinking about that this morning. We always, when we named ourselves the Beacon Street Union. I used to say on my bass drum head, the Beacon Street Union. But somewhere along the way, I think people started calling us Beacon Street Union, and it just became Beacon Street Union. So either is fine with me.
How did the band get together?
I was at Mass Art. Bob was at Boston College. That's where he met Wayne and Wayne and John, sorry. Met Wayne and John at Boston College. And Paul was working at the time, and Bob knew Bob was the connector. He knew all of us, and he brought all of us together. So Bob used to sit in front of me in the 3rd grade. That's when we met, yeah. So I've known him for a long time. So now, we went to high school together. We both played in the high school band together. Sort of, you in and out with each other. Sometimes you're hanging together, sometimes you're not. Seems like a year goes by, you don't, then all of a sudden you rediscover each other, you're still hanging with. So Bob was a trumpet player, a really good trumpet player. He was first trumpet in the band. They used to have the band director used to make these kids compete for where they were and where they sat. And Bob, I think at the time he was a sophomore, and there was a senior sitting in the first seat, and he kept challenging him for his seat, and he got it. So he was a good trumpet player, and but that's the way I thought of him, as a trumpet player. And when he approached me to be in a band with him, I said, "Is it going to be horns?" He says to me, "No. What are you talking about? I play keyboards." I didn't know that. So he told me he just went out and bought a Honor piano, and he had this amplifier, and it's going to be great. And did I want to come over and meet the guys and see if it all sort of worked?
And that was the original lineup?
It was the lineup, yeah. John singing, Bob on keyboards, Paul on guitar, Wayne on bass, and me on drums. So we used to meet in the basement of his house in Malden. His father was a lawyer, pretty well-established lawyer, and we used to actually play in his law office in the house. He would let us use off hours. But I remember we'd be playing, and the pictures on the walls would be like vibrating, He had all these framed, typical politician, all these framed black and white pictures. And his father, Max, was a great guy, and it was summertime. I remember we'd be down there and we'd be playing, and he'd be outside sitting in a lawn chair, sort of relaxing, smoking his cigar after dinner. And we'd get done with something, I think a Rolling Stones song, and Max yells out, "Play that one again, it's a corker!" And it was just so, it was just like great times. That's really all it was about. It was just about playing music that made us feel happy and trying to get good enough that we might be able to go out and get a gig somewhere. I mean, our idea of success was actually having somebody hire us to play in a bar and pay us. That's what we wanted to do. If we could do that, we thought we had success.
Where did the name come from?
Let's see. So it was early on. We had rehearsed a few times. We wanted to get a gig and play in front of people. We realized we'd need a name. We definitely wanted to be known as a Boston band. Our heroes at the time were like Barry and the Remains, And so one of the guys, Wayne lived on Beacon Street. I'm not sure if that's why we picked the name, but I think it just sort of became associated with Boston, Beacon Street. Probably was because Wayne was living on Beacon Street. He had an apartment at the time. And I don't know, we just, how bands get names. You're sitting around, you're talking, Beacon Street Gang, Beacon Street this, and it became, we were all in college, so student union, so it became like Beacon Street Union. It sounded like a place where people would want to go hang out, and
So the story's not true. It wasn't the name of a place where the band practiced?
No, we never practiced on Beacon Street. Well, we would hang out at Wayne's, for instance, right. His apartment, but no, we couldn't play there. I mean, he had a studio apartment on the first floor, one of those brownstones. I don't think that would have been too cool.
Where was your first gig?
There was a place next door called the Brown Derby. And right on the corner of Jersey Street and Boylston Street. And that was one of our first gigs. There was a band at the time called The Ones. Did you ever hear of The Ones? And they were pretty good. They did a lot of girl group songs really well, I remember. Like they did like Spectre Sound kind of stuff. It was just a four-piece, but they sort of had it together. And I remember we took turns playing sets, and we were totally not like that. We were like, our influences were sort of like blues as we learned it through English bands. Because, the classic story, the American kids didn't listen to the American blues records. We had to learn it from the British kids who were listening to the American stuff.
Who were the musical influences for you and your band?
Actually, I think the Stones, Kinks, Pretty Things, Yardbirds, big influence. Those bands more so than the Beatles. I mean, we loved the Beatles. Everyone loved the Beatles, but the Beatles were a little too nice for us, a little too sweet. And of course, then it got very produced. They weren't live anymore. They didn't sound live, and we weren't going to sit there. Although, in the beginning, when we were putting our sets together for the bar gigs that we were doing songs like Rain and Paperback Writer and We Can Work It Out and stuff like that. It was, we loved those songs. Just loved them. But it wasn't really our persona. I think our persona was a little bit more gritty, a little bit more bluesy, and then it became psychedelic. And we really loved that Yardbirds Little Games album. We must have played every song, in rehearsal, we must have played every song on that. And Paul was an amazing guitarist, and he could cut that Jeff Beck stuff. I mean, you remember this song on Little, you gotta go, if you don't know it, go back and listen to, there's a song on Little Games called Jeff's Boogie. You know that? Yeah, he knows it. See, Paul, he played that note perfect. He listened to it one time. He's an amazing talent. One time, had the whole thing down. We used to do it. We actually used to do that live. I don't think the audience in those bars could understand what we were playing because, they weren't listening to Little Games by the Yardbirds. They were listening to Wilson Pickett Midnight Hour or something like that, bar music. But we really got into that. We really loved the Yardbirds. And I think that was the beginning of our fascination and our love for that whole psychedelic thing. We started experimenting with feedback, and we started writing original material at the same time. I mean, when you listen to that song Speed Kills, you can hear the Yardbirds, right? Yeah.
When I'm walking down the street, acquaintances I chance to meet. Their names are strange, their looks I know, I see them every place I go. City life is much too fast, friendship there will never last.
Did you start writing songs initially, or did you just do covers?
Yeah, no, it was all covers in the beginning. And, in those days, we used to have to play 4 or 5 sets a night. Wow. There was a lot of material that we had to play, and we had to learn. All covers. I remember we played, one of our first gigs was up in Tingsboro at some kind of a truck stop. And it was a real blue-collar, sort of hillbilly kind of audience at the time. And there we are playing this, psychedelic music. And people were, looking at us they didn't know what to make of it. And there was sort of this, I remember there was almost a moment of silence, we finished a couple of songs, and it was sort of a big sort of pregnant moment. And then some guy, I think, who must have had a few, stood up and he said, "Play that psychedelic stuff, that's awesome!" And everybody started to get into it. I don't know what that all meant, but we got encouraged, so we kept playing. Well, we knew we weren't going to get beat up and thrown out, so at least that was a good thing.
How long was it after the band formed and were doing gigs that you got signed?
Well, let's see. So formed that summer between basically our freshman and sophomore years in college. So that was, what's the question? What year was that? I want to tell you it was 66, the summer of 66, right. So did that, played here on, Jersey Street, played up in Tingsboro, started to do some gigs like that, got up to Salisbury Beach. That was one of our goals. We had a buddy whose family had a summer house up there, and we got introduced to the Salisbury Beach sort of club scene through him, and we kept saying, if we could get that gig up in Salisbury Beach in the summertime, oh my Lord. And there was a place, I don't remember what it was called, the TikTok Lounge, I think, or something like that. And next to it, or on top of the building, was this clown, this great big clown that was had rooms inside it. It was like part of the building, and our dream was to play the TikTok Lounge and be able to stay up there in the clown. And we got that gig that summer, before the summer was over again. It was like, whoa, we made it to the TikTok Lounge in Salisbury Beach, and we're in the clown. And of course, that gave you an advantage with the ladies, because, you say, you want to come to the clown? There's rooms up there. But I remember we used to do, on Sunday at the TikTok Lounge, 9 sets. 5, we used to start in the afternoon, at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. We'd play, take a dinner break, and then have to do another 5, 4 sets, and then another 5 sets. Yeah. And how about this? Can you imagine this? Beacon Street Union. One of our big numbers at the TikTok Lounge was Righteous Brothers. You've Lost That Love and Feeling, with John Wright singing the Bill Medley part and Paul singing the Bobby Hatfield part, the 2 voices. That was like our big number to stop the show.
Wow.
Yeah, those were fun times. Okay, so sorry, so you asked me a question. So then we went back to school in the fall, and of course, going back to school, it sort of became a natural sort of thing to sort of tell people about, I got a band now, and, started playing college mixers and parties, frat parties. And actually had a buddy at the time who was in a band called the Lovelace Lads. His name was David Random. Do you remember that band, the Lovelace Lads? They were good. They were really good. They used to travel around in a hearse, and they used to dress in Dickens outfits. And I wish I knew the guy's real name, but the lead singer's name was Swine. He was lead guitar, lead singer, had shock of red hair, and they were great guys. They were a really good band. They sounded really good, and they used to play up in Dartmouth a lot. And I remember we got up there one time for homecoming weekend, and they were in one frat house and we were in another frat house, and I thought, oh my God, we're playing the same night in the same place that the Lovelace Lads are playing. This is awesome. We've arrived again. Every one of those milestones, you sort of set for yourself, you think, wow, So we did that, and then, so this was a great thing. There was a club here in Kenmore Square called Where It's At. It was a youth nightclub, quote unquote. They had no alcohol, pizza, soft drinks, that kind of stuff. And she booked national acts. Her name was Ruth Clennett, was the producer, the club owner. Actually, Dave Maynard. Dave Maynard? Yeah. He was an investor in that. Ruth Clennett was Dave Maynard's producer for community auditions, or whatever it was at the time that he was doing. So the 2 of them operated that club. And it was just for, under 21. And we got a gig to play Where It's At, Kenmore Square. And I thought, my God, we're now playing in Boston. We were so excited, because it was we went from these sort of bars to now, to us at that time, that was like a showcase. That was a Boston showcase. National bands now. We're on the same stage with people like Jerry Lee Lewis and Buffalo Springfield. When they came to town, they played Where It's At. Wow. And we opened for them and shared the bill. We each did 2 sets. My biggest disappointment, though, was Neil Young didn't come because he was sick or something. So who was there instead? I don't remember. But unbelievable opportunities like that. And at Where It's At, 1 week. So she liked us, thank goodness, and I guess we were popular, and so she kept booking us back. And 1 week we finished playing there, and sometimes we would headline when she didn't have national acts, and sometimes we would open. And she said, I need a band next week. Are you guys, yeah, of course we're available. And she said, I need a backup band for Chuck Berry. So you'll play and then you'll back him up. And we went, what? And she said, yeah, no, it'll be fine. You'll see. It's not hard. He'll come, he'll show you the songs you'll play. Really? So we said, okay. So that week, we were all very nervous about this. I remember in rehearsal, we got out Chuck Berry records, and we're all listening to the records and trying to learn the parts and so forth and figure it out. And of course, I don't know, was I 17 years old or 8, something like that, and trying to understand where this music is coming from and process it and so forth. And I remember we were there at the club early. We sort of got set up. We did a little sound check, whatever. And I remember the front door opened, and Chuck Berry walks in carrying his amplifier and his guitar. And he walks up to the stage. He puts him down. He says, "You the band?" And we said, "Yes, sir." Whatever. You know. He said, "Okay." And so he plugs himself in, and he says, "Drummer man." I said, "Yeah." And he says, "You only need to know two things." He says, "When I go like this," and he takes his leg, you know, he slaps it, you know, that Chuck Berry thing like that. He says, "You stop." And when I go like this, and he turns around and he wiggles his behind in my face, he goes, "You go like hell. That's all you need to know, all right?" And that's exactly what he did.
How do you think the performance went?
Oh, God. I'm sure we sounded horrible. I'm sure I didn't know what to play in terms of backing up Chuck Berry, but, you know, it was exciting and wonderful, and he was very kind, and believe it or not, I know I've heard a lot of stories about Chuck Berry, but he was kind to us, and we sort of had some laughs, we played some tunes, and that's the way it went.
So how did you get signed?
So we went through the fall, we played a bunch of college mixers, we were playing Where It's At, and then that fall, 67, right, that's when the Boston Tea Party opened on Berkeley Street in that synagogue, right, you know what I mean? And we were the second band to play there. The first band was the Hallucinations. And in fact, I think the Hallucinations played the first week by themselves, and the second week it was the Hallucinations and Beacon Street Union. And I assume you know who the Hallucinations were, right? Peter Wolf? Peter Wolf. Yeah. And we did a lot of gigs there together. We did a lot of gigs separately. It became part of the scene. That's where I met Dave Kinsman. Il Wynn played there. There was a band called Fluff, P-H-L-U-P-H, that played there. I'm trying to think of the other Boston bands that used to play there. So anyway, so Tea Party, we started to get more attention. We started to sort of develop ourselves. We started taking ourselves probably much too seriously. We started to think about music more like art. Worked for me because I was going to art college, so it sort of was coming together for me in an interesting way, the way I was processing everything. And we had a good spring. I don't remember, I mean, just doing like college mixers and clubs, Tea Party dates and stuff like that. And in May of 67, we loaded up. Bob used to have a white Bonneville convertible with an 8-track in it, 8-track tape player in it. And we had Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band on 8-track. And on the 8-track, you could separate the channels. So we used to go for rides and just like listen to one channel at a time. We were breaking down, you know, all the songs. But in that, we took that Bonneville to New York. We used to rent U-Haul trailers. He had a trailer hitch. So imagine, so there we are in a white Bonneville convertible with red leather interior with a U-Haul trailer in the back on our way to New York. And we did in one weekend, we did what they used to call guest sets. So if you wanted to get a gig, the club owner expected you to show up with your stuff, put on a show for free. He'd watch and tell you if he wanted to book you or not. So we took a weekend and we went. The first place we played was either Cafe Wa or the Bitter End in the Village. We did them the same day, back to back. I can't remember which one was first. I think it was Cafe Wa. And I remember going down the stairs and into the basement there, and there was a narrow stage over on the right, and there was a sign that said Jimmy James and the Blue Flames. And there was Fender amp with a white Stratocaster guitar, and there was drums and so forth. So, you know, the band wasn't there. It was like they were the band that was going to play at night or whatever. They were the house band. And it was like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I mean, nobody's in the band. A couple of people are at the Barflies, or, you know. And we set up, and we were told to play our set, and we played our set to air, you know. And we were thanked and sent on our way. And I remember literally carrying the drums and rolling the amplifiers down up Bleecker Street to the Bitter End. We get to the Bitter End. The Nitty Gritty Dirt Band was the headliner that day. They were playing that night. This is now like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And we went in and we set up on the Bitter End stage. Was another. I kept thinking, the stages were so narrow. They weren't deep. For a drummer, it's really hard because, you know, you got some depth. But anyway, we did our set there. And thank you, we went on our way. trying to remember the other places we played. We did 5 guest sets. The last one we did on Sunday was Steve Paul's The Scene, which was on the corner of 8th Ave and 46th Street. It was like 3 doors in, down a bulkhead, so it was a basement club. It was an after-hours club. And we played our set. The Doors had been there, like, I think a week or 2 before. We were really into the Doors by this point, too. In fact, I think we used to do some of their songs as covers. But anyway, so that was cool. We thought, okay, if the Doors played here, it's got to be cool, right? So we did our set, and I remember there was like a very narrow dressing room area behind this this platform that they called the stage, whatever it was. Low ceilings, it was a basement. And I was in there, I would sweat a lot when I remember wiping my face, and staggers in this guy with long hair, and he's sweating, and he's like, you guys, you blew my mind. You gotta come. I want you. You gotta play. And it was Steve Paul. And he said, when can you come? And he booked us for 5 weeks. We were like, had a residency there. 5 weeks that summer. We came back in late July, August, and stayed there for 5 weeks and played. And that's when Wes Farrell came to see us. Some other people came to see us. Paul Rothchild, the producer of The Doors, came to see us. And it was sort of very heady for, you know, egos and scrambling your brain about, well, you know, what, this is all going fast now. It's like, what are we doing? And, you know, Wes was very impressive. He was, I don't know if you know anything about him, but he was a very successful music producer, businessman, had incredible clothes, you know, tailored silk suits and all that stuff. I mean, he was money. He just smelled like money, which probably distracted us in the wrong way. But he was a great guy. But we ended up signing with him as an independent producer. He said he wanted us to come back that fall and record. You know, he was footing the bill. Wasn't going to cost us anything. The understanding was that he owned the masters and he was going to find a record company. And so we thought, what do we got to lose? What do we know? You know, what do we have to lose? This is like all just this amazing trip that we're on, right? It was just an incredible experience. No one's thinking about rights, royalties, licensing, intellectual property. I mean, I don't even think those two words fit together in those days, right? Somebody combined them since. And we just kept following the path. And so we ended up spending some time in the studio, A&R in New York. We recorded the first album there, and then we didn't hear anything. We went back to school in the fall. We would sort of say, what's going on? And then the word came down like, oh, you guys, Wes is making a deal. The record's going to come out. Like, really? Oh, yeah, he's making a deal. And then we were told that the MGM, that he sold, we were going to be MGM artists. And we were like so psyched. I mean, we just didn't know what this all meant, but, you know, so we're playing our gigs. We're still playing the Tea Party. We're going to school. We used to buy Cashbox and Record World and Billboard, you know, sort of like follow what was going on in the business. And I remember somebody said there's going to be an ad for the album this week in Billboard. So we ran to the store to buy the magazine, you know, and we look and it says something like, it's coming. The shot heard round the world. And we looked at each other and said, what? And it said, and it's on MGM or something. It clearly was referencing us, but yet there was something about it that didn't quite ring true. Like, what do they mean? It's like this. So there were like 3 weeks of teasers like that. And then the whole thing sort of got unveiled. It was like the Bosstown Sound. And we sort of looked at each other and went, what? This is like queer. This is like really weird. Like, what is this? And then we find out that there's 3 bands, all being packaged under this Bosstown Sound. I said, really? There's other Boston bands? Who? And we're thinking, is it Ill Wind? Is it Flav? Is it the Hallucinations? Who is it? And then they tell us it's a band called Ultimate Spinach, who we'd never heard of in our lives, and a band called Orpheus, who we'd never heard of in our lives. And we're thinking, well, wait, we've been in this scene for a couple of years now. I don't remember these bands being from Boston or playing the Tea Party or whatever, so What's going on with this? And, you know, it was Alan Lorber. He had signed those two bands. He got together with Wes. They packaged it together. They sold it to MGM. Somebody at MGM had this crazy idea that they were going to create the Boston sound like the San Francisco sound, even though the three bands didn't sound anything alike and didn't even know each other. Talk about the San Francisco sound. What, are you kidding? That was like a community. This is like, you know, so needless to say, we really bore the brunt of it because, you know, at the time, Rolling Stone was just coming into its own. They were writing and reviewing, and they were one of the first national publications to pan it and say, you know, this is BS. Don't go for it. Alert, consumer alert, consumer alert. Meanwhile, we were getting articles in Time magazine and Newsweek because they were buying the MGM PR machine. So they were talking about the Boston Sound, you know, they would have like the music section. We got reviewed in Downbeat magazine. I have it somewhere at home. I have a Downbeat magazine review of my drumming on that first album, saying I was a good drummer. And I'm thinking, something's wrong with this, because I hated the album. I hated the way I sounded on the album, and I'm thinking, a Downbeat reviewer thought this was good. There's something weird. Maybe it's those jazzers. They don't get it. They don't understand what we're trying to really play. I couldn't figure it out. The whole thing was such a weird, weird mess.
What was the experience like making the first LP?
The experience. It ended up destroying the band. I mean, we were all so uncomfortable with it that we weren't comfortable on our own skins anymore. It was like somebody stole our identity and represented us as something we really weren't. And Peter Wolf told us not to do it. I'm going to give him credit right here and right now. He came to us and he said, "What are you guys doing?" And we said, "Oh, what do you mean? We got a record, we got a producer, we're going to record." He says, "You're not ready." He said, "My band isn't ready, you're not ready. You got to pay your dues. It's never going to work." And we said, "Come on, you're just jealous." He was right.
What did you think of the album when you first heard it when it was released?
Oh my God, we were so uncomfortable. Didn't like it at all. Couldn't understand it. I mean, that ping pong stereo effect that he stuck on that thing was like ridiculous. It was so hokey. Yep, we had no control. We had no control over the mix. We never heard a mix. We never heard the thing before it went to master. Nothing. Once we left the studio, that was it. We heard some playbacks in the studio of the tracks. That was it. We never had anything to do with it after that. You know, not that we're on this level, but you know, you listen to the Darlene Love story about Phil Spector and what he did to her. I mean, clearly, not even in the same, but that's what happened. Those producers had incredible power. They did whatever they wanted.
The first single was Salt Street Incident?
Yeah. Right, which wasn't supposed to be as far as we were concerned. Our first single was supposed to be My Love Is. We wrote that song to be a single, and we wanted that song to be the single. That was who we were. South End Incident was sort of like a trippy song that we did as a sort of a mood piece, right? A mood piece in the middle of the set. But we would open with My Love Is. We wanted to be known for that galloping, you know, floor tom thing and Wayne's bass that was constantly pulsing away, and you know, that sort of minor key thing. And you know, when we would play that at the Boston Tea Party, it was a big hit. People danced, and you know.
My love is violet blossoms, tender to the touch. You will surrender to me. Within the realm of hearts embracing, don't you realize you're facing ecstasy?
Somehow somebody decided, no, let's do this. It sounds like House of the Rising Sun. They had a hit with that, so this will work for them. It's like, come on.
And here's Salt Street Incident, the first single from Eyes of the Beacon Street Union.
Paper faces, painted masks, plastic hands are tearing at my skin. I won't let them get in. Are they waiting in the night? I'm afraid. We are walking behind you. I'm afraid. We'll not stop till we find you. I'm afraid.
Then the next single was a cover of Blue Suede Shoes.
It was. And so Wes considered the failure of South End Incident as a personal failure. He kept telling us, I'm going to get you a hit record. We're going to produce a hit record. That's what he kept telling us. Okay. So when South End Incident failed, I think he took it upon himself to figure this out. And he went back and he thought about it, and he was really into John's head. And he kept telling John that he really was a great singer. You remind me of Elvis. You have that sort of Elvis thing going. You got that lower voice and that growl and so forth and so on. And so he convinced us to try Blue Suede Shoes in the studio, like jam on it. Yeah, that's how it came to be. And then he said, that's it. I'm telling you, this is going to, we're going to, it's time for this song to have a new life, and it's, blah, blah, blah. So again, what control did we have? So he released that one.
Here's Blue Suede Shoes.
Well, it's one for the money, two for the show. Three to get ready, now go, cat, go, but don't you step on my blue suede shoes. You can do anything, but play all for my blue suede shoes.
That was Blue Suede Shoes. The song was not included on Eyes of Beacon Street Union LP.
So then that didn't work, right? I mean, it had minor success, whatever, spotty market success here and there. You want to know why they put 405? First of all, 405 was a ridiculous thing. That was something we were just in the studio fooling around and probably, not on our guard. And Wes would say, hey, play the bass drum. And so he would go, now hit the snare drum. And I'd hit the snare drum. And he'd say, oh, good. Now hit the bell of the cymbal, right? And meanwhile, he's with Eddie. Was it Eddie Kramer? No, Eddie Kramer came. That was the second. Which album was 405 on? Eddie Kramer produced. Okay, Eddie Kramer was the engineer on our second album. So the first one might have been Shelley Yakis at A&R. But anyway, he took all these sort of isolated sounds. He'd tell Paul, do this on the guitar, make it sound like a gyro. And Bob, and so we were doing this like Monkees. We were like Monkees to him, you know what I mean? It's terrible. And so we didn't know what he was doing, and all of a sudden they're killing themselves laughing in the control room. They, wait, come in here, listen to this. And they put it all together, sped up the things and so forth. They made this crazy sort of, he said, no, that's psychedelic. And we looked at each other and said, oh my Lord, come on, that's ridiculous. He put that on the B-side because they didn't want anyone to play it. They would put songs, make it the B-side because they wanted the A-side played. The last thing they wanted was to compete with themselves. Right. So they put that as the B-side. Third record was Mayola, right? Mm-hmm. That ridiculous, ridiculous song. So Wes had a stable of songwriters. He was producing Tony Orlando and Don at the same time, and the Partridge Family, and whoever, in Beacon Street. It's like, we kept saying, what do we do? Like, we just could not wrap our heads around what had happened to us. It was like we were in some kind of a car wreck and had a concussion and woke up and everything was different. It was like the Wizard of Oz. Dorothy, where am I? So he was convinced he was going to get us a hit record. So he got one of those writers to write this song, Mayola. And remember, Wes had a huge hit with Hang On Sloopy. He was into these strange girl names. Sloopy, Mayola, right? Like, it's like a hook, man. It's a hook, I'm telling you. And we kept thinking, no, it's just not, it's like not like that anymore. And, but again, he had the control, and, we sort of probably made another deal with him, like, well, if you do Mayola, I'll let you do your song, kind of thing, So we did Mayola. Next thing you know, there's strings on it. And, it got released. Again, it's had some minor attention in some markets, but I think Cleveland maybe it did something. But it was just, we were feeling so bad about everything. It just wasn't us anymore. We just felt like...
Here's Mayola.
Hey Mayola, let's stop your bawling. Don't you know you can't come calling? Time I spent with you was all in fun. I was wrong, I was mistaken. Played games while you were making mountains out of moments in the sun. Hey, Mayola, go your way. Hey, Mayola, you can't stay. Hey, Mayola, away yesterday. Hey, hey, hey.
That was Mayola, released as a single in 1968. Did anything interesting happen when the band was touring?
How about this? On our first tour, we went back to New York to have our album release party at the Scene, where we started. They booked the Scene. It was like, welcome home, the Beacon Street Union, right? New album, the whole thing. We still were too young to drink. And all the record executives were there drinking and like patting me on the back and spilling the drinks on me. No one ever offered me a drink, you know, because I was too young. It was crazy. They're celebrating me, they're drinking, and I can't participate. I've got to tell you this one. So the album comes out, everybody's all excited. Wes is telling us, I got you signed to Premier Talent. They're going to book you. They're going to book the national tour. Frank Barcelona, personally, is seeing to this. You guys are going to make it. It's like, okay, what does this mean? You know, what do you mean? What does it mean? It means you're going on a national tour. We got these dates booked for you, like, you know, Detroit, Chicago, Los Angeles, Vancouver, British Columbia, Seattle. What? Washington, D.C. So it's like, what? And so he's, yeah, starts March. We're kicking off in March in Detroit. So I went to the dean's office and I said, I need a leave of absence. I need to take a year off. And they looked at me like, what are you talking about? And I said, look, I'm in this band. I got this opportunity. I want to do it. Can I leave and come back? Somehow they said, okay. Bob did the same thing. Wayne did the same thing.
So what was it like being on tour?
First stop, Detroit, Michigan. Grandee Ballroom. Opening for us, the Motor City 5. MC5. Never heard a band that loud in my entire life. I thought we were loud. We were like folkies compared to what they were doing. And but this was the absolute cherry on the cake for this gig. We had been sponsored by Custom Amplifiers. They shipped the equipment to Detroit. It was going to meet us in Detroit. We had no sound check. We had to go out on stage with these amplifiers that no one had ever seen before. We specified what we wanted, like they sent the catalog and Paul's, oh, I think I want a tweeter cabinet with high frequency tweeters. It'll sit on top, right at ear level. Wait. And Wayne had like double bass cabinets with these big speakers. I mean, it was like amazing, the equipment that they sent us. But we didn't know how to control it. And we got out on stage and we started playing. Like, fools. I mean, it's like, imagine any band doing this. Right. And first of all, the sound was awful. But I remember the worst thing was, I remember Paul was playing some solo and he was going for high notes. And I watched him all of a sudden double over in pain and like grab his head like this because that tweeter cabinet kicked in and pierced his eardrum, I'm telling you, with something that must have been so painful. It was great. It was crazy. I will say this though, for me personally, I got a sponsorship from Zildjian Cymbal. Crazy, we went from Detroit, went to Chicago, we played the Cheetah there, we went to Los Angeles, there was a Cheetah in Los Angeles, we played there. Went up to Seattle, we played in Seattle with a band. I remember they opened for us, I'll never forget this name, I thought it was such a cool name, Mother Tucker's Yellow Duck opened for us. It was either in Seattle or Vancouver, I think they were Seattle band.
You were the headliners on the tour?
Oh, you know, we were the headliner. It was like MGM recording artists, wow. You know, this Friday night, don't miss them. Meanwhile, Orpheus and Ultimate Smoosh were doing the same thing. But we were never on the same bills together. We were sort of all traveling around. Oh, how about this? Here's a great nightmare story for you. In Los Angeles, MGM staged a publicity stunt to try and get attention for the band, right? So they some genius is thinking about the name Beacon Street Union. Union, oh yeah, Union. We should have a strike. We should have some kind of like people with placards and like a strike, because it's like a union. We don't know any of this, right? Right. So what they did was they staged some stupid demonstration, like, I don't know, a city hall someplace in Los Angeles, with people going, why join the Beacon Street Union? Which was supposed to be a provocative question, and the answer was because their album is on MGM, or some ridiculous thing like that, right? And they had handbills, like about this big, pieces of white paper with why join the Beacon Street Union on a question mark, and they dropped them out of helicopter above the thing, and some of the packages didn't open. So they fell like bricks to the ground. And there was some kind of horrible lawsuit or something. I don't know what. Thank goodness we were not part of that. But you hear these stories and you go, what is happening to us? Who is making these decisions? And how can this be happening to us? I will tell you this though. We played Constitution Hall in Washington, D.C., opening for The Who, the night that LBJ announced he wasn't going to run again for office. Wow. And that concert stopped and the place erupted. It was just, people were like, you might have thought the war had ended. It's just like people were celebrating for like a half an hour before we'd all kind of calmed down. We started the concert again. But I remember that was, talk about an out-of-body experience. Wow. Imagine. We had some amazing experiences.
Is it true that the band played with Jimi Hendrix?
No. Hendrix used to hang out at the Scene. It was the summer of '67. His album came out in September, I think. He had already been to England, already produced it. And so he was waiting. He was in that wait mode, like it's sort of like it's all going to start up soon, but he was still they were putting all the machinery into place for him and so forth. He had his band, and they were, I guess, rehearsing during the day or whatever. But at the Scene was a hang for musicians who came to town. So, and Steve, Paul, the first set, I think, the early set was like 10 o'clock, and it was like tourists. 12 o'clock, it got a little more serious, because by then, if there was like a concert at the Fillmore East or whatever was going on in New York that summer, the bands would start to come over to hang. By 2 o'clock in the morning, it was just bands, groupies, the tourists had gone home. In fact, Steve, I think, was pretty much closing the place. I can remember being in there on nights when they would close the club to the public, and the people that were there inside were treated like a private party. It just turned into a private party. And he would come up with champagne, and we would jam. So Hendrix would want to play the drums. He never wanted to play the guitar.
Really?
So I never got to play my own drums when we had the jams, because we're not going to tell Jimi Hendrix, get the hell off my drum set. So he would play left-handed on my drum set. Keith Moon destroyed Bob's piano, like just with his fists. Can you see him? Like doing this on the Honor piano, never stayed in key again after that. And Noel Redding blew up Wayne's bass amplifier and really pissed Wayne off. And he kept telling him, "You're going to pay for that, man. You're going to pay for that." "Oh yeah, don't worry about it," And it was like, it was crazy. It was crazy. But so that summer, it was a lot of sort of hanging with Hendrix, but never played with Hendrix, other than in those. And they only wanted to play Stormy Monday. I don't understand why. That's the one song they always. So Hendrix is on my drum set playing Stormy Monday. Keith Moon is pounding on the piano. Noel Redding's playing the bass, and John Lincoln Wright is singing Stormy Monday.
Can you talk about the incident with the flower at one particular show?
Oh, that was only one time. It was at the Tea Party. It was that winter before the album came out, I think. And we were sort of sick and tired of the whole flower power thing. I just thought it was just like, come on with that already. Get serious, right? And so, mass art, performance art, all that kind of stuff. We were at a rehearsal one time, and we probably took it too far, but said, we should do something. Like, we should express ourselves, express our opinion. And flower power sucks. It's like wimps. And, we're a Boston band, Boston Strong, which wasn't the expression, but, like that whole, Boston, Irish, street tough you know, and so I got this idea, and I said, what if we got big bags of flour? Flour. And we had them on stage, and we set up the whole stage, and we, you know, made it like a stage set, and just let them sit there the whole night. Let people wonder and wonder and wonder. And then at the end, when we're doing our big, whatever, Baby Please Don't Go or something, 20-minute extravaganza, what if John, instead of smashing a guitar, he takes one of those bags of flour, it looks like it weighs like 100 pounds, and he just lifts it up, and he smashes it on the thing, and flour like flies out. So of course, like, well, how are we going to do that? He's not going to be able to lift 100 pounds. So, you know, all the bags were stuffed with like newspaper or something like that, and we took just a small bag of flour and put it at the end and sewed it back up. I remember sewing the burlap bags, but we went somewhere and got burlap bags so it looked like really sort of like, you know, very earthy, crunchy, authentic flour. And I think I spray painted, you know, stenciled the word flour on them, and so made it look like it. And it's like making props for a show. And then he did it, and so he slams the thing down, and the flour is flying up all. Well, we forgot one thing. All our instruments were there, and so everything was covered with flour. Bob had flour inside that Honor piano, and you know, it's like all the circuitry, everything had flour. And it was like, I think the joke was on us in the end. But you know, it was one of those things where like, this is gonna be really cool. This is gonna be really cool.
Then came the time to record the second LP, The Clown Died in Marvin Gardens. What was that like?
Well, by this point, we had evolved. John and Wayne were really into writing now, and they had written. John loved crazy rhymes. He loved. I remember he once wrote he wrote this lyric once, Forsythia Bush, like it was like an ode to a woman. Forsythia, but he had that kind of sense of humor, and Wayne loved it too. They loved that sort of nonsense stuff, that like that kind of poetry that Lennon would write and everything. I could try to remember the British guy, the author, the writer who wrote all that stuff, that everyone sort of was taken with at the time. But so they wrote this line: "The clown died." Wait a minute, what is it? The ground dried and hardened after the clown died in Marvin Gardens. And they were killing themselves. Like they're on the floor rolling around because it was like, wow, what a rhyme. Come on, man. That's like, whoa, we got to write a song. So they brought it into the rehearsal. And I remember they started sort of we started riffing on it. John was sort of singing it. And Bob started that sort of do-do-do-do. And Wayne played the bass thing. And I remember I couldn't for the life of me figure out a drum part. It was like, what is this? Like a salsa beat? Is this something? So I think I picked up shakers or something. I started shaking like, you know, back and forth like this. And, hey, that's cool. Let's do that. So I ended up having to play shakers on one song, which I thought was so weird.
Here's The Clown Died in Marvin Gardens.
By the tracks of the B&O Railroad, Derek's erected the wooden hotel. I look at the bank, I'm elated to tell the director is doing so well. Then the ground dried and hardened after the clown died in Marvin Gardens.
That was The Clown Died in Marvin Gardens, the title track of the Beacon Street Union's second LP, released in August of 1968.
So we sort of liked it because it became very sort of, I don't know, different. It was different than what we had been doing, but we were getting further and further away from sort of our roots, those blues roots and all the rest of that. Wayne loved Procol Harum. Oh my God. Well, we all loved them, but he really loved them. And when he wrote that song, Angus of Aberdeen, I kept thinking, you ripped them off, man. It's like, that sounds like it's one of their songs. And it was like, no, come on. So he wrote this song, Angus of Aberdeen, and he wrote the lyrics to that one. And I remember there's a lyric in that song about the bull in the stall with the bulging eye. And it's like, what are we singing about here? Bob and I were looking at each other like going, what is this? This is crazy stuff. But I loved the song. I mean, I loved the melody. I really thought he came up with a great melody. And so it became sort of like, whatever, it's psychedelic lyrics, you know, it was literary, you know, like metaphors and all that stuff. So,
Beckoning the shepherd boy mustn't steal away. We went valley riding springtime. Tuesdays we would take our wares to town not far away. Or build a trawler at Dogger Banks. He always had a tale or two.
Those two songs were sort of like they gave the impetus to that second album. Although we didn't know we were doing a second album when we went into the studio. Wes said, come to New York, we need to record some more stuff. Do you have songs? We said, yeah. We went in and recorded those two. He said, what else you got? So then it became a scramble for more songs, because all of a sudden he told us we had to deliver an album to MGM. That was in the contract, and like whether we were ready or not, we had to do it. Don't worry, he'll find material for us. That went on the album. And then what was that other song, Now I Taste the Tears? That was like some kind of a wannabe R&B song that somebody wrote for somebody and didn't get sold or got recorded. It was sort of like in the dustbin somewhere, and they pulled that out, and this is good for John. Come on, John, sing this. So we ended up doing that song.
Closets banging empty, and the dresser drawers are bare. Oh, so bare. Oh, dishes in the sink still. I guess the room use some air. I should try to catch her. Will she really care? I guess not.
Oh, August Afternoon was on that album. That was a good song. We wrote that at the Tea Party on an August afternoon. We were like hanging at the Tea Party rehearsing, and we just started playing with that 3/4 time, and John had that sort of soulful, you know, voice kind of thing, and he was sort of very mellow, and I remember him sort of, you know, he had that cry in his voice about, I feel like fading away, however he did it, you know, it was like, it just sort of, it came very bluesy and sort of real down, and we liked that song a lot.
This very August afternoon, I feel like passing away. Every August afternoon feels the same. Maybe it's not that it's August at all. Maybe it's only expecting the fall, but it's August now.
How did you come to record the cover of Baby Please Don't Go?
Oh, Baby Please Don't Go got put on that. Oh,
Yeah, it was like
brother.
The last 16 minutes.
Oh, brother. You know,
But that
we
wasn't
played.
intentional?
Well, no. I mean, we had done it in the studio because Wes said, "Why don't you, let me hear that song?" And we did it a few times, but it never was as good as it was when we did it live, when we were just really sort of like free and feeling it. And I don't think we ever had a chance to really sort of find that song in the studio. And they re-put that on there. I never thought that was the best version of it that we ever played. Then the Amboy Dukes did it. Didn't they release it as a single or something like that? It was a similar, wasn't it them? Somebody released it with like a psychedelic version. I remember thinking, well, we missed that boat. Should have been us.
Here's Baby Please Don't Go.
Baby, don't go. Baby, don't go. Baby, don't go down to New Orleans. You know I love you so. Baby, please don't go. All right. Yeah. Got a man done gone. Got a man done gone. Got a man done gone to the county farm to get shot and song. Baby, please don't go. All right.
That was Baby Please Don't Go from the Clown Died in Marvin Gardens, which at 16 minutes took up the whole second side of the LP. May I Light Your Cigarette was released to the second side of Mayola.
Oh, May I Light Your Cigarette? Now that was fun. That was Bob on the trumpet. Remember I told you he was a trumpet player in high school? So we were sitting around Wayne's apartment one night on Beacon Street, and Wayne had, I think, a guitar and an amplifier with a tremolo, and he had slowed the tremolo way down, and he was sort of playing that do, whatever it was, And Bob, why he had a trumpet, I don't remember, but he started blowing air through the trumpet. And John started to fool around with that lyric, like it was like a play, like he was like narrating a scene or performing a scene in a play, like, right? And oh, this is really cool. Like, this is almost like, you know, like a tone poem, you know, kind of thing. And so, of course, Wes, the minute he heard we had something weird like that, he wanted to lay it down and, you know, get it on. What else you guys got?
Here's May I Light Your Cigarette.
Are you interested in sticks instead? In sticks instead of me? Do you really want the matches now? Or only what attaches them? Go tear it off and strike it then. But blow it out. Oh, blow it out.
That was May I Light Your Cigarette, which was included on the Clown Died and Marvin Gardens album.
So that was sort of a fun thing, although, you know, in the context it was sad that it sort of got caught up in all that. But yeah, you know, and remember we had played with the Velvet Underground, so they were an influence. And I think that May I Light Your Cigarette, I mean, this is probably weird to say, it doesn't sound like the Velvet Underground, but you know, it sort of had that sort of strange, sort of like I'm in a movie kind of, you know, when, you know, some of their stuff was just really, like it took you to a place, like you almost could imagine you were like in a scene in a movie when you listened to some of their music. So I think, you know, we were probably channeling a little of that at the time, but yeah, that was just sort of us fooling around, experimenting.
Did you tour after the second LP was released?
No, because then by that point MGM was running out of steam, so they didn't put the same kind of muscle behind it. Both albums made it on the charts.
The Eyes Of LP peaked around 75 on the Billboard charts.
Yeah, I think so, somewhere like that in the top 100, right. And the second one, I don't know if it broke into the top 100. If it did, it was maybe in like the 90s, or maybe it was just under at the time, whatever. 75 with a bullet.
What happened to the band after the lower chart performances of the second LP?
Yeah, well, everything was happening. By that point, Bob was the first one that, ironically, he was the first one that sort of got fed up and said, you know what, I'm going back to school. I can't do this anymore. It was like, I feel like someone stole our musical identity. I don't want to do this anymore. And so he left. So we tried to continue as a four-piece. It was interesting because Paul and Wayne were trying to fill in Bob's parts.
So how did the band break up?
So we played live shows as a four-piece for a while, and then Paul decided to leave, right? He was the next one. So he left. Oh, wait. Yeah, Paul left, and then we tried to fill out the band again, and we recruited a couple guys, so we became a five-piece again.
You started another band called Eagle. How did that come about?
So Paul left, so Wayne, John, and I were trying to figure out what to do, and we met a British bass player named Bobby Hastings, who was a great guy, very talented, and really good musician. And he was interested in playing with us. And so Wayne said, I'll move over to guitar. And I thought, well, that makes sense. You write all the songs anyway, and you've been writing them on a guitar. And so he moved over to guitar. Bobby Hastings played bass. John sang, I played the drums. We changed the name to Eagle. And here's another one for you. So we're sitting there in New York with Wes, and he goes, so he's going to record this band Eagle, right? And so he says, what are we going to call this band? So we were sitting around drinking Budweiser. And you have to remember, this was before, okay? We said, what do you think about the Eagles? And Wes goes, I swear to you. He goes, what? That sounds like a football team. Why would you ever call a band the Eagles? So he says, the Silver Eagle. And we went, no, man, that is like so pretentious. It's like, here you go again. And we, you know, that Eagle band, we want to strip it down and do like basic rock and roll, which is what some of those songs on that Eagle album really all about, and almost like recreating some of our favorite hits from the bar band that we used to, when you were a kid, and but doing original versions, like sort of taking your muse from that song and doing your own. Like Pack Up on that album was sort of like, a Bo Diddley song, right?
Leave my picture, better leave my wallet when you go home. If you go home, it's my picture on the wallet. That's mine, fine, But it's hard to back up down, so don't back up down. You back up down if you ever try to make it alone. Never gonna make it alone. You won't make it alone. Won't make it alone. I'm a singer.
And so we had this argument about Silver Eagle, the Silver Eagle, no. And so finally we compromised again and said, okay, just Eagle, Eagle, no silver. He said, okay, Eagle. So we became Eagle, but we would have been the Eagles. Yeah, Come On to Nancy's Tent. That was, we had a road manager at the time who came up with that name. And it was, I wonder if I should tell this story or not. It was a way to sort of say, up yours to the establishment. Because he said, you know how they have like BS&T, CC, what's Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, where all these acronyms. He said, wait till they get to the acronym of Come On to Nancy's Tent. And we were hysterical. We were all so hysterical. So when Wes said, okay, what do you want to call your album? We said, oh, we want to call it Come Under Nancy's Tent. And he went, I love it, man. That's so weird.
Wow.
No, Wes took those masters, he sold them to a label called Janus. Janus Records, like the god Janus. Yeah. And once again, they were unfinished tracks. We never got to finish them. We never got to hear any mixes. And he hired, are you ready for this? He hired Dwayne Eddy to come into the studio and sweeten the tracks.
Really?
Yes, on some of those tracks, Dwayne Eddy is playing lead fills.
Oh, wow.
And we didn't know this till the album comes out. And I said to Wayne, did you play that part? And he says, no. And it was like we sort of called Wes and said, what is that? And he said, well, I had a studio guy come in and sweeten. I couldn't release it the way it was. We had to. So Eagle was John, Wayne,
Yep.
myself, 3 original members, and this British bass player, Bobby Hastings.
Wow. So Bob, the original Bob.
He was, and Paul had already left the band, yeah.
Okay.
Although, on the Eagle album is the last song that Bob recorded with the Beacon Street Union, actually all of us, Paul too, even though it was released as Eagle, it's the one called Kicking It Back. And that was Bob's last gasp at saying, enough with the psychedelic music, let's go back to our roots, let's play good old-fashioned soul music. And so, it was a da 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 da. Every time I hear that, I think, we could have been Jay Giles. We should have kept going in that direction.
What was the reaction to the Eagle album when it was released?
Pretty much nothing. We thought it was going to sort of vindicate ourselves, that we were finally going to play some good, straight-ahead rock and roll. We never got to finish the album. One more time, a product got released that wasn't satisfactory to us. There's even some bad notes on it, for Pete's sake, that didn't get fixed. I mean, it's just so frustrating. we did gigs as Eagle. We liked a lot of the songs. We liked playing a lot of those songs. I really loved playing with Bobby Hastings, the bass player. He was just great. Sort of renewed us, invigorated us, but it didn't really go anywhere. Pretty much at that point, it was done. I think that's when we picked up a couple of local people. We started performing again as Beacon Street Union. Just to make a living, just to play some gigs and, you know, live gigs. And I mean, we still could get fairly good money because of the name. So we did that, and then it went through a bunch of evolutions. In the end, we actually had a sax player in the band, some new personnel. In the end, it was just me and John. Wayne left too.
Really?
Yeah. So it was just John and myself. And I remember one of the last gigs we played was up in Boylston Street, where the Berkeley bookstore is right now. You know, corner of Mass Ave and Boylston to the right there. The Unicorn, George Papadopoulos, who used to own the Unicorn, who originally was, you know, on Newbury Street, which was the first place I ever saw on Newbury Street. We went to see the Jefferson airplane. I had to not say Starship. The Jefferson airplane.
Wow.
Played the Unicorn the first time they played in Boston.
Wow.
But so he had moved up there, and we were playing there, doing, like, you know, Thursday, Friday, Saturday nights, or Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, something like that, just to make some bread. And that was sort of the end of it. It was petering out, and John was getting really tired of it, and I sort of was too. And John was listening to a lot of country music. And he loved Merle Haggard. He turned me on to Merle Haggard. Oh my God, at one point I was obsessed with Merle Haggard. And John said, I want to start a country band. Will you play the drums? And I said, well, it's really not something I want to do, but, you know, if you need a drummer, you know I'll be there. And Paul, I think I think Paul played in that band too in the beginning, brought him back, because Paul always loved country music. And so we were in there with him when he started the Sour Mash Boys, but that didn't last long because it wasn't really for me. I went back to school, I got my degree, I got married, I wanted to sort of, you know, start my life. It was like, enough of this already, you know, I wanted to. So, yeah, John continued with the Sour Mash Boys. I'm sure you know that whole story. And, you know, he devoted his life to country music. He just...
In the northeast of the United States.
Yeah, I know. I used to say that to him. I used to say, why are you doing this? You're making it so hard for yourself. If you really want to be a, you know, successful professional singer, why country music in Boston of all places? You know, nope. He was so stubborn. He was so stubborn about it. But yeah, and that was sort of it. It just sort of dissipated after that, you know. No, you know, Wayne got married. I remember picking John up, and we both went to the wedding together. Hadn't seen him in maybe, I don't know, 8, 10 years at that point. And then we sort of promised ourselves we'd stay in touch, but then we didn't again. And no, I really didn't see him too much. At the end, I tried to get in touch with him before he passed away, and I just couldn't. I finally got to somebody, his wife or somebody, who said, no, I'll give him a message for you. Couldn't get near him. But I don't know the extent of the illness. I don't even know what killed him. I knew you were going to ask me that. So Paul is a professional guide in Maine. Paul always loved nature, always loved hunting and fishing. So he moved to Maine, off the grid, so to speak, as he calls it. And he and I stay in touch. We exchange emails or talk on the phone every few months. Sometimes it might be 9 months, sometimes it might be 2 months. Haven't seen him in a while. He sends me pictures. I just got a picture of him standing outside his cabin in Maine with the snow above the windows. And he's with some message like, spring is coming, honestly, it really is. He looks the same, he looks great, just his hair is white now instead of blonde. And he still plays. He's got a following up there. He puts on shows. He does a show, he was explaining to me, he does like almost like the history of popular guitar music. He plays all these different styles and has a small backing band. And he, he seems pretty happy. He just loves Maine, loves what he does. He paints and does all that. And then Bob is a successful entertainment attorney in New York City. So he went back to BC, then he got his law degree, passed the bar, and so he has a successful business. He does a lot of clearance work for television programs, networks, projects, that kind of thing. And Wayne is a retired businessman. He went back and ran the family business, and I think he spends half the time in Florida now. We keep threatening to see each other and get together, and somehow it doesn't seem to happen, but one of these days I hope it does. But I can't get them to play. And my biggest frustration is that none of them will. Well, Paul will. Paul says, if you come up here, we're going to play, we're going to, in fact, he wanted to book me for a gig up in Maine. It was too far to go. I just could not get motivated to try. John had a reunion.
Oh, John.
John threw himself a 25 years in show business party or something at Jonathan Swift's, I think it was, wasn't it, in Harvard Square? And he tried to bring all of the musicians and all the bands that he ever had all together in one place. And so, yeah, that was the last time we probably played. Now, Wayne didn't play that night. He had hurt his back or something, so he didn't play bass. Paul definitely played, because I remember him turning and doing his crazy routine with me. We always had this thing where he would turn around and look at me, and he'd say, just as we were about to start the song, we'd be counting off, he'd turn around and say, got any gum on your dick? And then he'd hit the chord and we'd start playing, And then he'd look back at me 3 measures later, are you laughing? And he did it that night. That's why I remember. He won't stop. It's like it has to happen. And I think Bob played that night, although I'm not sure he did. But anyway, yeah, that's my biggest regret, is that we don't get together and just jam together, which is why I'm here tonight, because I jam with these guys and try and keep it alive, if you know what I mean.
Well, speaking of keeping it alive, in 2010, the Beacon Street Union albums, or CDs now, were released on Cherry Red Records.
Karma first, I think, wasn't it? The Italian label. Yeah, it's interesting. You know a lot of stuff. I'm impressed. You've done your homework. So, right, that was a surprise, and turns out Alan Lorber was responsible for that. He got his hands on the masters somehow and sold them to them, and they released them. And at the beginning we were sort of like, what is going on again? Isn't this over yet? It's like it's following us to our graves, right? Once again, some producer got hold of our music, and now he's doing this with it. But in the end, I was sort of proud that they had enough interest that people wanted to do it, and I got some CDs, so I got vinyl and I got CDs.
But do you ever see any returns for royalties or anything like that?
Missing? What do you mean missing? How about never got any?
Never got any?
No. Are you kidding? One time, I remember, I don't know if I still have this or not. I once got a check in the mail for 13 cents from ASCAP or something, because my name was probably on 405, I think, or something like that. 13 cents I got. That was it.
You guys did local television at the time. Do you remember what shows?
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's also a sad situation, because we don't have anything to show. I mean, it's like those things don't exist. But and I'm not sure I want to see them, because I think most of the time we ended up having to lip sync, because that was what was going on at the time. And come on, Beacon Street Union was not a lip sync band, if anything. But remember Derek Sanderson was a popular Bruins player at the time. He had a show on Channel 38, and we were booked on his show once. Then the Hawk, Ken Harrelson, when he played for the Red Sox, he had a special on Channel 7, and we were on that show. I'm sure that definitely was a lip sync. I don't remember if the Derek Sanderson show was a lip sync or not. We played, there was a popular show at the time in Providence, like a teen showcase for bands and records, so like their version of American Bandstand, I think, or something like that. remember being on that show. But the thing that I'm really sad about that just doesn't exist, we've never been able to find it. We were part of a documentary called Twanged that ABC produced in 1968 when we were recording our album, and they came to the studio and they recorded us. For the documentary, I'm sure they interviewed Wes, but there was a lot of footage of us in the studio making that album. And it was one of the segments on that documentary, Twang. It was sort of like one of those news magazines about the state of rock and roll music or whatever. And the night so we were very excited that we were going to be on the show. We just wanted to see it. And the night that it aired on ABC, it was blacked out in Boston. And we never got to see it. It was preempted for something. I don't remember what. And we never got to see it. And all these years later, we've been trying, and you think Bob, with his connections now, entertainment attorney, has very close friends at ABC, the legal department and all that. Nobody can find head nor hair of that special. It just doesn't seem to exist, which is so sad, because that's the one thing I think I would have liked more than anything, is to just have some documentary footage of what the experience was like. I tell these stories to my kids. They say, "Come on, Dad, you're making this up." Oh, yeah. Oh, Mr. Dick, Mr. John, Mr. Bob. So Steve Paul's, right? So there we are in Steve Paul's club. And Steve was a very, an interesting guy. And he sort of treated the bill like it was almost like a variety show. He had a knife thrower. In this little cellar club, this guy used to throw knives. And then the same guy, his name was like the Amazing Santini or something. He also had a thing where a hoop where the knives went in, and then he would blindfold himself and get to the back of the club, in between the cocktail tables, and he introduced himself. He goes, "Now, ladies and gentlemen, for your entertainment pleasure, the fabulous Santini." And he would jump up from behind, he would hit the button and jump up from behind the little console where the thing was, and Saber Dance would play. And then he would he would show you the knives and bang them together, click them, show them to the audience, and do these things with the knives. So the finale was that he would blindfold himself, go back as far as he could between the cocktail tables, and then run full speed towards the circle of knives and do a somersault through it, right in front of the drums. He would land, and it was, so then one of the other variety acts was this guy who comes up on stage, with the ukulele, and he's singing Tiptoe Through the Tulips. And I'm looking at this and I'm going, "Bob, this is really weird." And he says, yeah. And we just kept watching this guy. And he was there the whole time we were there, the whole 5 weeks we did the residency. He was there because he had a residency. Steve Paul became his manager. Remember that? He managed him, and he tried to make him a national act. He was on the Tonight Show, he married Miss Vicky, remember that? Yeah. But at the time, what was his name? Herbie, I can't remember. And he was just a really strange dude that had pancake makeup all over his face, long fingernails, the ukulele, he'd sing with that falsetto. People would throw shoes at him in the club. Some guy would, "Shut up! You're an idiot!" And he would, but then, we would be in there between sets or whatever, and, we'd be hanging, and he would say, "Oh, Mr. Dick, I think your band is so good," and it was just the weirdest thing. I remember trying to explain to my parents, when, "How's it going?" And I'd say, "Yeah, well, it's interesting, I'm meeting some interesting people." Wow. Yeah. John liked him. I think John took a liking to him. In a sense that he saw him as sort of a tragic figure, and John had a big heart. And I think he really tried to show him some respect. I think Bob and I sort of thought it was a big joke, like most people did. But I remember John really trying to sort of show him some respect. I thought that was kind of cool. We did. Wait, good. I'm glad you brought that up. So, what was it? 67 was the Red Sox, right? So we're at the Rathskeller in that September '67, right? We had come back from New York. We had recorded. the album was, sort of half done. He was mixing whatever, and so we were back in school, and we got a gig at the Rathskeller. And I remember, I was in Mass Art, so I could paint. So I remember taking 2 pieces of 4x8 plywood and making a huge sign that said something about the Beacon Street, now appearing the Beacon Street Union, soon to be MGM something coming out, blah, 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 like a promotional billboard. They let us put on the sidewalk in front of the Rat. And I remember the night that the Red Sox won, that pandemonium in Kenmore Square, on the news, watching my sign get carried down the street by the crowd and smashed to pieces. But the other thing that happened at the Rat, the other thing that happened at the Rat was in those days, there was still a big sort of us and them mentality in Boston. There were the jocks and there were the hippies. And a lot of BU jocks, Northeastern jocks, used to hang out at the Rat. And I remember we were playing there, and these guys came in, they sat down in front, and they started spitting at us. And they started saying things under their breath, like, derogatory things. And John, who would never take anything from anybody, he was a Mainer. I mean, he was, he had been a jock in high school anyway, but now we all long. Oh, I remember that night. Oh my God, Wayne went out of his way. It's probably what prompted it too. Went out of his way to really make his hair big, and he had like a silk scarf on around his neck. And I think he had a girlfriend at the time, Kim, who was like making up his eyes with like eyeliner and stuff like that. Like the look. And probably those guys just couldn't hack it. They were like, whatever. And they started saying things, and one thing led to another, and before you know it, this melee broke out. And, I remember what happened. Somebody said to the manager, hey, those guys are hassling the band. You should get them out of here. And they caught wind of it, and they said, yeah? You're going to throw us out? I don't think so. And then a beer bottle started flying. But I remember, like, somebody came up on stage, one of those guys grabbed the mic out of the mic stand, John's mic stand, and started whipping it around like a bolero, right, on that cord. And the thing is going, whoo, whoo. And I'm watching people, I'm thinking somebody's going to decapitate. And Wayne had this friend, Kim, who's a beautiful young woman, very petite, had been in the ladies' room while this thing broke out. And she came out and she saw Wayne with this guy, going at it. And she said, what are you doing? You can't do that to my whatever. And she jumped on the guy's back. I mean, this is like classic, right? And I remember this guy picked her up off the other guy and just right in the teeth. And this poor thing went flying across the room. She must have weighed 90 pounds, And at that point, it was like, this is like over, pal. I'm out of here. This is like too much for me. So anyway, and of course they ran away. I don't know if the police came, and there we were with broken equipment, and feeling sort of bad about the whole thing. But yeah, that was our time at the Rat. Sounds like a Rat experience, right? And I think South End Incident was the catalyst for that too. I think we had just finished that song, that spooky little song, and they were so like looking at us like, what are you guys,
Tonight, as I walk with the rain on my face, I wish I could find some place to hide. I am dying inside. When they find me, what will they do?
Yeah, oh yeah, both. So Hatshell's close to my heart because we made a dear friend there that night. He was an MDC police officer whose name shall remain nameless to protect the innocent. But he came backstage and started hanging with us. And he was a great guy. And it was the beginning of a long friendship. But that night, I remember his lieutenant, I think, walked in to the dressing room, and he surveyed the scene, and we had snuck beer into the Hatshell in the drum cases. We had beer, and he yelled his name, and the guy stood up and, at attention. He said, what are you doing? You're supposed to be taking care of this. Get outside. You know, he like really dressed him down and so forth. And then I remember a week later, the guy showed up at our band house on his motorcycle because we had told him where we lived. And he was just, what a great guy. His name was Tommy. I'll leave it at that. Tommy, you know who you are. And then so that was an interesting show. And then the Cambridge Common, we played there a number of times, and that was always a good. I have a great picture on my wall still to this day of the Cambridge Common concert that Wayne took with me, taken from behind me. So I'm sort of in the foreground because he was behind the stage when he shot it, and it's one of my treasured photos from the time. People always stop dead in the tracks when they see it, and they go, "Whoa, when was that?" And the thing that's amazing, I don't know what kind of lens he was using, but not only am I in focus, I was wearing a denim jacket. You can see the texture of the cloth and denim. You could see the people's faces clear as a bell in the audience, like watching us. And you can pick out people. And someone since has pointed out to me that, see that guy right there, he was a Cambridge narc. See what he's doing? He's watching the kids to see who.
Wow.
You know, we played Harvard Stadium. Janis Joplin, 40,000 people as Eagle opened for her.
Oh,
That was exactly, you know, you remember the scene in The Rose, the movie with Bette Midler, where she was like staggering, she was on an outside stage and they were bringing her up to the front and she couldn't, at that point, the poor thing couldn't, you know, was out of her mind. That's exactly the way that was that night. It was like, when I saw that movie, I thought, whoa, I think I've been there. Yeah, she still was amazing. I mean, but no, she was pretty, yeah, she was, but playing for 40,000 people in Harvard Stadium, I remember my drums sounded like, I mean, I'm like, and all I hear is, you know, it was crazy how big that place is, yeah. Well, both. It depended on the market, because at the time, FM was just sort of coming into its own. BCN was brand new, you know. But I remember in Philadelphia, we did a radio interview, and this guy called the station. We were on live, you know, the guy was interviewing us, he was taking calls. And this kid calls in, and he sounded really shaken. He was obviously on something, and he said, can I talk to the drummer? And so I said, hey, yeah, this is Dick. He says, man, I gotta ask you, on 405, that bass drum, man, that's going so fast. How did you do that? How did you do that? And I was like so sad by that. It's like this kid was obviously on drugs and he was freaking out. And I thought, Wes, is this what you intended? Is this what we wanted to do? We want to take people who are on trips and give them like worse bad trips or something like, what? And I don't remember what I said to him, but I was kind. But, you know, I just hated that. I just hated that it had become that. You know what I mean? It was sort of like, it was like a circus act. It wasn't music anymore. It wasn't what we started out to do, which was to love playing music together. It had become an experience that someone robbed us of it. That's the way we all felt. Oh yeah, we did.
You did?
No, we did, because it was too easy for the promoters. Are you kidding? They loved it. Oh, we'll get the 3 Boston bands together and, you know, package as a night of Boston Sound. So no, we did, and actually we got to know the guys in Orpheus. That's how I got to know Harry, and, you know, a great guy, and we got along best with them, with the Orpheus guys. It was so weird though, because, you know, they would come out and ba da 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 da, and then we are boom ba da boom 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 ba da boom boom. You know, it was like the 2 bands. I mean, it's like, I don't know what the audience was thinking. It's like, who, you know, they were there for them and some of them were there for us, and, you know, it just didn't make any sense. We didn't play very much with Ultimate Spinach. I can remember playing with them at the Tea Party after the fact once, I think, but I don't remember any other time. You know who else?
Sound.
There was a band called The Lost when we were just starting. They were our heroes too, The Remains and The Lost. I should have mentioned them. Willie Alexander. Oh, we loved those guys. We loved those guys.
Were they older or younger?
Yeah, they were older than us, yeah,
So they had
little
been out
older.
for a little while.
Yeah. In fact, they played it where it's at. They were really the local headliner at Where It's At. I think that's why when we got the gig at Where It's At, we really thought we had arrived. Oh my God, we're playing on the same stage as The Lost, because we loved them. Yeah. So Ted, Kyle, Willie, Walter. Oh, Walter. He was heartthrob. The girls used to. Oh yeah. The bass player. Oh yeah. All the girls loved Walter. Oh, those were great times. It was such camaraderie, and you know, it was so great to be like 17 and doing this stuff. You know, it's like, come on, what kid doesn't have those dreams? It's so different now, so different. It's become so much of a business, and you know, this. Anyway, yeah, it was so innocent. That's what it was. It was innocent.
Thanks for listening to Rat Tales, Boston Rock Stories. Rat Tales is produced and directed by Lenny Scolletta and Mike Hoban, with a huge thanks to Medford Community Media in beautiful downtown Medford, Massachusetts.